In exercise 2, we are going to make a series of timber sections. So these will be cut in section in essence. So if we go to the example sheet, so we need to make a series of timber sections to these standard timber sizes that you'll get. Please note that I've provided you with the filled region. You're going to need this when you're creating your family. So we'll do the same process as we did for exercise 1. So this is pretty straightforward. The only difference is that we're going to make this family parametric, and we're going to have to add some parameters and categories to the family. So if you go to File, New Family, so you're going to go to Detail Item, Metric Detail Item. So Metric Detail Item, Open. Okay, the first thing that you won't have in this family will be the filled region. So if you go to filled regions, you'll notice that you won't have the correct filled region in this family. So the best thing to do, you can go back to the view or the project view. You can copy and paste, so Control-C, and you can paste this information into just make sure that you don't have a full region active, Control-V. Okay, so what it'll do, it'll paste this information and embed that filled region into this family. So I would remove that for now. Now typically when we do make a timber section, it is made up of a series of lines and filled regions. So I've got a one hatch line, which will comprise of the timber section inside, and we have a filled region, and then the filled region will have an outline of a certain thickness, for example. Okay, so just to make this a bit more understandable, so the first thing we'll need to do is in Manage, we'll need to introduce, so in Object Styles, we need to add some items or categories to this detail item. So we need a subcategory in essence. So this is a category detail item, then we need a new subcategory. So we need to create 2 of these. So the first one will be timber section. If you're going to make multiple series of these families, try and keep the naming convention the same, just because it just means that when you're in the project, you can manage the line types or the categories a lot better. Okay, so timber section. Typically this would be a line weight 3 or 4. I'll make it 4 for now. So we've got a timber section. I'm going to create a new subcategory, and I'm going to call this hatch line. You'll see that I'll try and name the same naming convention for the detail lines in the project file as well. Okay, so that'll be line type 1, and this is a very thin line, and it's a gray line. Okay, so we've got the 2. I'll press apply. Okay, so you need these categories in order to classify things correctly if you are going to make these a bit more usable in the project file. The next thing you need to do is you'll need to create some reference planes. Okay, now this is quite difficult to understand in the beginning, but the more you try and do this, the more it will become a lot more logical it will appear. Okay, so I'm going to create 2 vertical, and it'll tell you, Revit is telling you that it's going to be a vertical reference plane. So I'm going to create 2 of these. Then I'm going to create 2 horizontal ones. Doesn't matter where you place them. These will need to drive the shape. In order to make a parametric family in Revit, it needs reference planes to drive the shape. Then what you need to do is in Create, you'll need to add some dimensions. So I'm going to add dimensions. So you'll notice that this reference plane, the center left and right and front and back, these are pre-built into the family and they're locked and you can't delete them. So we just need to add additional reference planes to drive the shape that we're trying to create. Okay, so I've got 2 dimensions over here, and I'm going to equal them. So if you use the equal command, you'll see that Revit will then associate an equal parameter to them. I'll go DI again. So I'm going to quickly equal these as well. And you'll notice that they will equal around the centers. These are pinned, so they won't move. So it means that everything else will move around. Okay. So then I'm going to use another dimension, so DI on your keyboard as well. I'm going to use, so this dimension is what's going to drive the shape. Okay, so 7. So this I'm going to make a lot smaller. So let's make that let's make it 100, because these actually are quite small, these timber pieces. Okay, all right, so we've got a timber section. Now, in order to make or we've got an outlines of what this timber section can become. Now what we need to do is we need to assign a parameter. So we need to create parameters to the dimension so I can drive it in the project. So I'm going to go and say create new parameter. That will become a width parameter. You'll see W equals 200. Now just note that you'll need to make this an instance parameter. That's important. It just means that you can change the family in the project on the fly rather than it being driven by a set of strict parameters in terms of, you'll see in the next exercise, we are a bit more, we'll use a parameter that will drive certain sizes, so you're not guessing. Okay. This one, I'm just going to give it a new parameter. I'm going to call this H for height. So we've got a width parameter and we've got a width parameter. Okay. So this is all I need to do for now. Now this is quite interesting, and this is how it's driven. Okay, now you can see that this is an instance parameter and the height is not. So if you do make this mistake, you can go and edit the parameter and make it an instance parameter in the family types option. The family types option allows you to add additional parameters that can be driven by some maths formulas, for example. But we'll get into that a bit later. Okay, so let's just test the parameters. I want a 38 by 38 timber section. Press apply. So I'm just testing. We call it flexing. So I've flexed the parameters and I can see everything is working as it should. The next thing we need to do is we need to start introducing some line work to represent the detailed section, timber section. Okay. So in create, we're going to use the fold region tool. Now this is very important. You need to select the correct category or subcategory, and I'm going to draw a rectangle driven by these shapes. Now you need to click these lock icons, so it just means that it will form a relationship with those reference planes and the shape will be driven by the reference planes. You need to assign the correct fold region and you can simply finish the command. Okay, so there we've got our first part of the timber section established. So if I go to VG, for example, now here you can go and assign, so maybe that's too thick for now, we can make it 3 or 4, but we'll leave it for now until we drive it, and until we use it in the project, then we can make some further changes once we're in the project. Okay, so that's the first part of this done. If the line weights are getting hard to read, you can simply temporarily switch those off. Now we can look at the line work. The next thing I need to do is to create some detailed line work. So if I go to lines, I need to make 2 hatch lines that go from one diagonal to another. Okay, so one diagonal and another diagonal. Okay, now what's interesting about this line work, it will try and form a relationship. So if you've got reference planes in first, so the goal is set your reference planes up or your constraints up first, and then build your line work over that. If you do it in the opposite order, you will not achieve the outcomes or the desired outcomes. Things won't be hosted and try and form a relationship with the reference planes. If I stretch the line work now, you'll start seeing that this object has now become fully parametric, and it means that I can drive these values by entering these values over here. So let's go for a 38 by 38 again, just to double check. Press apply, press OK. Great. So you see that this is working fine. Now I'm going to switch my line weights back on. Now I've just noticed something. This line work was not correct. That you need to make sure that that's hatch line and it should be a nice gray. Okay, you have to make sure that the correct subcategories are assigned in the family before you load them into the project. The next thing I want you to do is save this, save as family. I want you to save this in the location where you're working. Okay, so I'm going to call this timber section. I had one in the past, so I'm just going to save over that one. Yes, I want to replace the existing file and I want to load into project and close. Okay, now that it's in my project, it should represent correctly. Okay, so for the first stage, you need to make a 38 by 38. So as we've dropped the family in, you would notice that it's a 38 by 38 section. So what we need to do is duplicate the process. So select on the detailed item, right click, and you're going to say create similar. So this will recreate the family So if you put in its location into the next location, all we need to do now is simply select the detail item family and change the height and width parameters. Okay, so it's 50 mil wide and it'll be 76 mil high. Okay, so I've got those mixed up in the wrong order, so the width should have been 50, my apologies, 50, 76 mil high. Okay, great. So I'm just going to duplicate this family again multiple times, and you'll notice that the family always hosts around the center of the object. Great. So this one we need to readjust, get it to the correct dimension. So height 114, this will be 38, this will be 50 by 152. Okay, great. So pretty straightforward. Just double check the dimensions, but you'll notice that I've given you some information to help you set this up correctly. All you'll need to do next is go to the annotate. So annotate, you'll need to go to aligned. Now please select the corners that work for you, and remember you need to answer these questions, so please dimension the correct diagonal. Okay, so please just give me this distance. Thank you.